All right, we will call this meeting to order. It's 12 noon on my phone. That clock's a little behind, but call this meeting of the Missouri Valley Complex Committee to order. I will call the roll just to avoid any delay on the owl there. So Heim.
Here.
Gerlow.
Here.
Martinezson.
Here.
Peters.
Here.
Hills and Digger.
Here.
Horning.
Here.
Senthal.
Here.
Olson.
Here.
Koselik.
Here.
How about I butcher mine too? McCoy? Did I miss anybody? All right, didn't screw that one up. We have before us the agenda. First, we will look at the approval of the February 19th or February, no, that is the February meeting. That wasn't it. Yeah, meeting. Sorry, I was still on medical leave then. Any additions or corrections to the minutes as distributed?
I don't know, did it work?
No, it's not on.
Okay.
Safety, many college students heading out to popular beach towns to get some time away from school. Later this hour, we will have to.
Hold on a minute.
February.
I gotcha.
All right, we have a motion. Okay, with a second. Great, all in favor of approval of the February 19th minutes? Aye.
Aye.
Same sign, any opposed? And approval of the February 19th. The next item is the approval of the agenda. Are there any additions to the agenda?
Years. Now, this is the first reading.
But here,
Started rolling out.
there's a request to add to the agenda, a flow chart presented by Auditor Splonskowski based off of requests from the last meeting. Hearing no objections to adding that, I would put that right before Commissioner Munson attends. That way we can get old business out of the way prior to. Any objections? All right, we will proceed with the agenda. And with that in mind, Auditor Splonskowski, you're up.
It's nice yellow paper for you all. I'll watch the wire this evening. Here. Now, a huge pile of this very yellow paper. That's one. But it's not very
Get her used, huh?
Thank you, Art.
Interest rates.
Yes, I hope this is kind of what you guys are looking for. We started working on it basically right after the last meeting. My assistant here, Thomas, put a lot of work into this, trying to make it as understandable as possible. And we looked over it to make sure it made sense. We even went on the state's website, as Mr. Governor had mentioned, and looked at their flow charts to try to imitate them as much as we can. So here, the main thing you have is the main things is the revenue, which is on the far left, and the expenses, which is on the far right. Everything in between is basically the details pertaining thereto. When you look at the revenue, for instance, for the interest earnings, obviously we had a lot more transactions than that. However, what we did is we compiled them all per bank. This is 30+ pages compiled into one sheet. So this is more like 1,000-foot view versus what we gave you last time, where it was basically on the ground type view. So I guess from here, I'll just take any questions.
What's the line of the American College students?
Just intersecting a line, literally. So this is part of the larger county discussion. What is the thinking behind segregating these funds over so many accounts in so many banks? Like, I can understand spreading out the investments and CDs and that sort of thing, but the actual banking accounts, What's the logic there? Do you know?
I'm so glad you asked that question. And, that's something that I have had discussions with the commission about and so on and so forth. But to give a little bit of history, when I became auditor, we were probably in 11 or 12 different banks we had funds in. And, I saw that and like, this is completely unmanageable. There's money everywhere. It's very hard to follow. And so what I've been kind of implementing since I became auditor was two goals. One of which is get down to 5 or 6 banks. We're currently down to 7. I'd like it to be 5. And then the other thing I would personally like is to be in all North Dakota banks. I would like to see North Dakota county funds in North Dakota banks helping local banks. That's what I would personally like to see. There's no law saying I can't do it. So that's kind of one of my goals as well. And we're right on course for doing that. It takes time, it takes management, it takes preparation. So really what you're seeing here is a lot simpler than it would have been before I became auditor. One of those things, is also according to our investment policy manual, we are to be diversified in banks as well as diversified in types of investments. So, we do it differently than other counties. Cass County, for instance, they have all their investment in one bank. So it's just the way that this county commission has chosen to do their investment portfolio or the investment policy, I should say. So that's one of the reasons that you see several different banks, the funds being in several different banks.
So that's a long way of saying you really don't know why they set it up this way, right?
The it's, yeah, it basically, there's no number of banks that's specified in our investment policy. However, what I've been trying to do is reduce it to a manageable amount. Why they chose to go with so many banks, you'd have to talk to 2 or 3 auditors ago to see why they did that.
Yeah, I think that, you know, there's a pretty strong perception that this is what the Bank of North Dakota is for. That it's not necessarily for a regular person can go out and get a checking account, but that's not their bread and butter. It's primarily for municipal holding accounts like this. And I can see there being different accounts under one bank, but having them spread around like that would seem to make things more complicated and open the door for nefarious activities.
It does make it more complicated, and if you want to present that to the commission, that'd be great. So now as far as the Bank of North Dakota goes, we have to be careful with how we use them because they are not allowed to compete with North Dakota banks. So when we go out for bids as far as investing funds, we cannot necessarily use Bank of North Dakota because if they're taking business away from North Dakota banks, that puts them and us in a precarious position. So if, you know, we do have funds with them as far as our sales tax proceeds and all that kind of stuff, because they're a holding place for those funds. But as far as our operating account, our general account, our reserve accounts, that's a little bit different story. So, that's one of the reasons that even some other counties don't invest primarily or even at all with the Bank of North Dakota necessarily.
If I may, it might provide context and I might be completely off on this, but in my professional life, we had a flow chart that looked similar to this. And we too had investments and accounts at all sorts of banks, North Dakota banks only. But one of the reasons that I got, and I'll use this loosely, that it got so out of hand is because for a period of time, it got to be a point of just chasing interest rates, chasing the best rates. And since we're a membership organization, how we could forge relationships with those. And I can appreciate the complexity of this because in my professional life, we also have varied sources of revenues and all sorts of different accounts, but also the time that it takes to pare down on something that may or may not have been managed then how it could be now. So I can definitely see both of the questions there. I can see that this could be a problem. A lot of work, use that. A lot of work on managing these. So that might be a similarity there.
And that's probably true because when I was looking at previous investments that we were in, they were at 2% interest, and that was the best they could get at the
Right.
time. And so that's probably one of the.
And then it is a hassle to pull that out and close the account and do all of the paperwork, so oftentimes it's, let it be.
I guess in my experience, banks, the more that you have with them, the more they're gonna work with you. And so it would seem, even in the low interest rate environment, that having a consolidated approach, about 10 years ago, I sat in on a meeting with the president of Bank of North Dakota, and he explained the not competing with North Dakota banks, and he said that was primarily related to consumer retail products like debit cards and online banking and that sort of thing. And that their primary focus was the municipal type of accounts. And like I said, I can see spreading things out for the investment side of things.
Yeah.
But as far as just the accounts that you're using for operations, it would seem to be logical to have more consolidated like the other entities have around the state.
That generates from honoring Black history.
On the owl, but is there any other questions or discussions as it relates to the flow chart connected to what we're here for the Missouri Valley Complex to discuss? If not, I will thank you for the work on this again. Coming from an area that has had to do this, I very much appreciate the amount of work and time that went into putting this together. But you will be better for it.
Oh, yeah, and
You have it now.
I have to give credit to Thomas. He put a lot of work into this as well. And yeah, we wanted to produce for you a good, understandable, product.
And I guess I will request the reserve the right to, once we have time to digest this, to possibly follow up with additional conversations in the future.
Absolutely.
You might need some bigger paper for the rest of the county.
Yeah. Thank you, Auditor. All right, moving into the next agenda item, Commissioner Munson, I understand you have a briefing for us.
Just a couple quick things. Number one, I talked to the contractor working on the sewer that's running through Missouri Valley Complex. There's a little holdup in their world. They're working on some dewatering plans that need to get approved. And so their start time is yet to be determined. They were hoping to have been there by now. But I didn't get an actual answer as to when they would start. The second one, and Josh is here, and I'm gonna bring Josh up. Josh is putting together a proposal to add an asphalt racetrack to our facility. And so this is the group that needs to hear Josh's plan and to take a look at what it would take to do that. So with that, I'm gonna turn it over to Josh.
No, it's not, and two, rocket money,
Go on.
it's a finance. So, and.
What's the dirt track?
Yep.
Couple things here. Told you guys that I was gonna work with to figure out who managed the south of that area. It is just the Corps, Army Corps of Engineers. Tony did specify that we can use that property. If we delineate it, we know where the wetlands are. If we alter the wetlands any bigger than a half acre, we either have to buy a wetland credit, which is 1 credit per acre, or add 1 acre somewhere else. Now, originally the plan was, I was thinking about putting an asphalt track down there, but I think that we might just move that across the street. I think that's going to benefit everybody better, is you guys can use that for campgrounds, parking, whatever you guys want to use that for. Because we're already into spots that I noticed are wetlands with the dirt track. Issues with that, but the parking there is actually classified as wetlands, we have to address that. It's just, once you guys get that plan established, Tony at the Corps is waiting for it. He will tell you how many credits you will need. And then it's 120 days before a permit can be issued from the Corps to alter those wetlands. Other than that, they said it's free game. The only issue is it's down in a floodplain, so whatever the county says that you gotta do for the floodplain.
So what is your ask of us?
I think we're gonna go ahead and move away from the asphalt track being on the Missouri Valley. We are looking at, and I did talk to school land, who manages school land. They are not allowed to sell or lease to a government or municipality, period.
Okay.
It would have to be purchased privately before anybody could approach to use that property. That is what I was thinking, is moving the asphalt track over there. There's more space. There's rules that the city has put for the asphalt track that we were more than able to comply with, so.
That would have been a nice asset to have an asphalt track out there, but when we built that track way back, it was out of the wetlands area.
Yeah, the
We got
wetlands
it
is
all approved back then, cause I
Yeah.
helped build it.
back. What the Corps said is you can dredge the wetlands. You can remove and clean it up. But if you fill it in, you must fill in or add somewhere else or buy wetland credits from Ducks Unlimited. Those are $83,000 an acre. So my suggestion is put the campgrounds down there, put parking down there. Dredge, make nice lakes. Where you take an acre, add an acre somewhere else, make it look nice. You have everything else up to the north, so
Can we still use that track as a dirt track then?
yes, the parking dirt track that is on the drawing is the issue. Part of that is in the wetlands, and there's some playground that was on that map that is also in the wetland. So we have to figure out how much space those two take up.
Never had that trouble before. Something new they dreamed up.
Laws have changed a lot on wetlands over the last couple of years. Okay. And then, Scott, we have to build dirt berms and stuff around that track because we have to enclose it.
So when you built that, you had it permitted
Yeah,
and everything.
it was all approved by the Corps of Engineers, but we had them out there several times.
Do we have any documentation for that, you think?
Oh, I thought it was verbal. We had it through the Swenson and Hagan came up with the plans on it.
Okay,
It got approved through them.
because I wasn't sure when we had talked, so.
The Corps doesn't have anything on it. But the last show is the dirt track was there. And it does have notes that it was approved, but they don't have any paperwork on it. That's how long ago it was.
Back in 1989 or 90.
Yeah. So they only save that stuff for so long and then they just do it.
That thought was going.
So if you had it and it's verbal, do you need to get it again, or is that?
No, that's good to go. We can go out there as long as we can get everything's committed, we can go get a permit. We just have to enclose the racetrack.
Okay, so is there anything in that area that is then, just to clarify, in the wetlands that all are like the motorcycle track, is any of that in
The
there?
very bottom of the motorcycle track is in the wetlands. And Tony was a little upset about it, but as long as it's less than a half acre, she's gonna let it slide. But it's gonna count against you as your half acre of alteration. So it's either we take that, we build that up, take that half acre somewhere else.
I'm not sure where the wetlands are at, the line would be, you know, it's.
Where that whole drop off is, at the bottom of the drop off, from the racetrack all the way to the property line, is currently listed as wetland.
And so you don't know, is that where they plan on putting the sewer?
They're coming across the track heading from the southeast corner up to the northwest, right? Or northeast.
Yeah, through the dirt or through the motocross track and then across the circle track.
Yeah.
But they will be coming through some of that wetlands on the bottom.
But they will have to return that back to
Yes,
it.
they will return.
But, part of the record as well, delineate that.
I'm working with Dave on that now. Yep.
Okay. As soon as Mr. Munson gets the delineation done, that defines where the wetlands really are, because there isn't a current map, we will know more, but the last map they did shows that part of that motocross track is in the wetland. And that will count against you guys.
Since before the pandemic. And as budget airlines like Spirit highlight new routes for major airports, including.
To the school lane.
Cross highway.
Oh, okay. What we're gonna do is we're gonna probably put the asphalt track there and put the parking there. And then when you guys need the parking, it's gonna be available.
Gotcha.
I'm not gonna block it off when you guys have a fair or anything going on. It'll be available for parking, so you just have to figure out how you wanna cross that street.
So it's my understanding, please correct me if I'm wrong. My understanding is that you were looking at developing this within the confines of the Missouri Valley Complex.
Correct.
That there's limitations that you really just can't get around right now, so you're looking at going off-site. And more so here to kind of provide an update on that and to offer
The information.
the information and the offer that, you know, parking may become available
Yeah.
as we develop the plat and the lands.
Yeah, cause the way it's set up now, if you guys had your drawings, all your stuff set up and submitted, you're not gonna be able to get all the permits you need for probably 4 months. Whoever's pulling the permits.
Right.
So that's, me and Scott, that's literally what we're waiting on is permits.
So would that be, if a guy was gonna put asphalt in the center of that, racetrack area for events and stuff like that, that wouldn't be allowed on the infield?
Oh, for the dirt track?
Yeah,
That's just floodplain. We have to build that up.
yeah,
If we was like for the fair and stuff, you guys wanna run concerts in there, like most fairgrounds do, we just gotta build that up.
Yeah.
I think it has to come up like 3 feet.
that much, huh?
Yeah.
That's a lot of dirt.
That's why I got a guy with a dump truck.
Make that true.
Take that big pile of dirt and just put it in.
Yeah, just push it over. Yeah, push it right in there.
A lot of fuel to go through.
No, the spot that we were originally looking at for the asphalt track will be too small.
Okay.
Cause we have to enclose the track. We have to put dirt berms up, noise reduction. That's from the city. If we wanna be within a mile of any housing, we have to put up dirt berms. That's why we have to enclose the dirt track. And it's just gonna be too small. So if we go across the street, there's more acreage there, we can do that.
Understood.
I have a quick random question. And hopefully it doesn't apply, but it's one of those things where better get out ahead of it. Is there any issues with like oil and gas runoff associated with the wetland issue?
Code requires us, and will require the dirt track to mitigate those. Storage tanks, specialized pits, specialized membranes that have to go down.
Yeah.
In pit areas.
Okay.
On the track itself, we're able just to, we have to clean it up during the race.
Any other questions, comments from the committee? Or anything else? All right, well, thank you for providing the update, and regardless, keep us posted on how it goes forward and if there's a symbiotic relationship in the future. Commissioner, did you have any additional updates? All right. Let's move ahead then to the zoning and plat updates.
Thank you, Len Nightmare, Cincinnati Engineering. Just get you a couple updates and then maybe have a few requests from you as well as we go forward. So planning and zoning next week is the public hearing for the zoning. I don't anticipate any problems at this point. I don't bet any public really cares that much one way or the other, as long as it's being used for public facilities. We should have public zoning. It makes sense for that purpose. We are preparing the preliminary plat right now. Last monthly meeting, we did bring copies for everybody to take a look through and see if he had any comments, and Steve was gonna gather them. I haven't heard back from him that he has any comments from anybody at this point. Orally yet, maybe. But to that point, and to the wetland discussion, we were having some more internal discussions in our office about the wetland situation. There is almost assuredly wetlands on the western part of this plat as well. You know, the maps that that are put out, those are sort of generalized ideas. They're not really specific to say, well, this is a wetland. So you do need to have it delineated. Our recommendation, and speaking with Chairman Munson as well, is that you would get permission from you to hire out somebody to go and delineate the wetlands for you. Typically that can't start right now. It's a little too early. We need the growing season to actually be here. So it's probably a couple of months out before we can get that delineation done. Which brings us to the point of, do you still want us to submit the preliminary plat at this point? And I ask that because when we find out where the wetlands are specifically, if we end up finding out, oh, this wetland is in the middle of a roadway, or it's in the middle of where we had intended to put a stormwater pond, that's gonna change things around, and then we're spending your money when we could have just waited a little bit and found a way around it a little bit better. Or we can still submit that preliminary plat at this point and start getting comments back from the city on other issues that they're gonna have. You know, the wetland discussion could be ongoing, but they may wanna point other things out that we can discuss further, like how the roadway is constructed, who's handling them, is it going to be gravel, is it gonna be asphalt? A lot of questions that still could be answered, or we could just have some more informal meetings with the city, get those issues discussed before we would finally submit that preliminary plat. So a few options for you out there. I think primarily though, the wetland delineation discussion would probably be the highest priority.
I would open it up for comments and questions first, and formulating one that's not quite there yet. Right.
The first thing I wrote down is doing the wetland thing. That is not something your current, I'm gonna call it a contract,
Sure.
would cover, correct?
Correct, and our firm doesn't actually do wetland
We have
delineations.
to.
We take it from another firm and
Okay.
and incorporate it into our work.
So then I guess this might be more for you, commissioner, is how would that work? I mean, because I think that that's a given, that has to get done. So do we need to go to the county commission and ask them to fund this somehow? I mean, I got lots of ideas, but yes.
Yeah, I would ask Landon to give us a ballpark price
Okay.
so that I can take it back to the commission for approval. For that.
I'm gonna tag team on that real quick before this goes too far, because, and kind of jumping an agenda item, not really. I was going to tee up a discussion during the, commission's update that we had slated for April 7th. If there was the feeling to push that back, given everything else going on. And so there's a longer discussion there. But what I'm kind of getting at is I think we might be in the same vein here to let's get it done the right way and make one big ask to the commission when we have all of the information available.
I think it's important that we get back in front of the Burleigh County Commission, first and foremost, to give them an update on what we've been doing and where we're at in this process, so that they have an idea of where we're going with the approvals that they've already given us. So I think it's important that we get back in front of them sooner than later. The additional ask for the delineation side of it is something that we should tee up or bring up to them at that point. So that we can at least prep them that this is gonna be the next step before we go to the final plat, is that the right term?
So am I understanding correctly that there is going to be, needs to be 2 public hearings on the planning and zoning side?
And planning and zoning side, yes, 2 public hearings, effectively, actually 2 public hearings total between planning and zoning and city commission. So
All right.
the preliminary plat gets a public hearing, the final plat gets a public hearing, and the preliminary plat doesn't get the public hearing, it just gets agendized, and it's like, they don't just say yes, or tentative approval, provided your final plat meets this. So it's 2 public hearings total between P&Z and city commission.
Would it make sense, or would this be in your ballpark of developing like a maximum and minimum sort of estimate of what needs to be delineated so that the commission knows where the boundaries might be, you know, either in the narrowest or the widest, and then that would help justify the pitch to them?
Yeah, we can certainly get you a ballpark area where, I mean, there is a federal map out there showing where these wetlands theoretically are. So yes, we can certainly get a ballpark idea of what we think it would be.
Right.
My question is, we didn't put hiring Schwarzenegger out for bids. We just hired him because it was under a threshold or whatever and stuff like that. So, I mean, if this delineating wetlands would have to go out on bids, that's gonna be a whole lengthy process. So I think we should develop a plan today, even if no one can give us a ballpark, it's $100, it's $100,000, whatever, of a plan of, we're gonna ask the county commission, it's gonna go on bids if it's such threshold. Maybe it has to just go on bids so we can find out who's gonna do it, because we don't have a relationship with someone. That's probably the best way to do it. And are we gonna use Missouri Valley Complex money, which is probably what we should do, right? And that's what the ask would be, so it doesn't affect the budget necessarily or anything like that. So it can get public notice bidded, because I mean, how long does that take, 30 days?
That'd be more of a question
Right,
for
like to do
auditors,
bidding?
you know, to put something out to bid, Mark would have the details.
It's typically 2 or 3 weeks.
Oh,
That
okay, so
needs to be noticed.
it to be noticed,
Noticed.
To be noticed.
and then we're gonna open them, then you gotta give the bid, so we're talking, I think it's,
90 days.
I guess. Maybe I'll write down a motion while I think here, what I wanna say.
Yeah,
So the, would not going to the city with the first plan or the first step, would that hold up any of the horse track and all that type of, would that hold that up, or is that number one?
It does delay in the sense the final plat wouldn't be approved until later on, obviously,
Anyway.
but without a wetland delineation, we're gonna get stopped at a certain point anyway, until the city can be assured that we're not destroying wetlands
Even though
without
we
a
know
plan.
that probably isn't in the wetland, we still need that.
Yeah.
Okay,
because it's
okay.
one
I've had some,
property, right?
yeah, and I've had land delineated just 2 years ago, so, and it's about, it was $10,000. It's not $100,000.
Really?
It takes a couple weeks and this and that, so I mean, I don't know if that 10 grand mark, I'm sure it's gonna be somewhere in that neighborhood, 10 to 15, because that's a lot bigger area
Yeah.
than I was dealing with, but.
Quite larger than yet, so we would be on your property, they would flag some areas that we would come out on the resurvey, and we know where their flags are to show it on your map.
Do you guys usually sub that out or does client do that directly? Because that might come into play into whether it needs to be bidded or not.
Sure, we have subbed that out before. We do have a couple of groups that we work with that do wetland delineation. We can supply you their names for this.
Marie got that motion figured out yet?
What,
Plan to the 40.
here's my question, what do we call the fund? Is it the Missouri, cause it wouldn't be like the interest, what would we call that?
Missouri Valley Complex.
Fun.
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 That's what it's,
Is it
that's
an
all it's on my
restricted fund?
paperwork, yeah.
Okay. Yeah, then I know what I would like to say.
Okay.
But maybe,
If I can interrupt just a little bit, so our first meeting with the city or the planning and zoning is our zoning, which is in process, we're not gonna stop anything there. It's the next plat side that we're gonna wanna make sure we have the delineation done prior to that.
What's our target date on the plat side?
So I would have said, before we were discussing any wetlands, it would have been probably 3 months out at this point, 2 or 3 months out. Now it's gonna be dependent on when we get wetland information.
So we were looking at May-ish
Yeah,
to begin with, now we'd be looking at August
yeah,
possibly.
if May is our time that we can actually get some delineation, because it's the growing season, maybe they can target it at that point, then we can start moving forward.
I think May is when they wanna wait till about then anyway.
They want to see some growth out there.
Yep.
Marie?
so I would move to recommend to the Burleigh County Commission to put out for bid. I'm gonna call it a job of delineating wetlands at the Missouri Valley. Complex. And to use the Missouri Valley Complex Fund monies to pay for this. To pay for that job.
Attorneys for him weren't exactly clear immediately on his.
We have a motion on the table. Is there a second? Okay. Motion, as I wrote it down too quickly, is to recommend to put before the county commission the recommendation and request to bid for delineating the wetlands on the Missouri Valley Complex site using the Missouri Valley Complex Fund to pay for it. Any discussion?
No, we do know for sure there isn't any existing map or any existing work that's been done.
I can, if you go to the federal wetlands mapper, they will show you areas that they believe have wetlands. That is not the same thing as having a firm go out there and actually verify it on the ground that these are wetlands. Wetlands change and grow and disappear over the years, so it's an idea of where they are, but it's not an absolute.
Thank you.
Any further discussion?
I want you right after the.
Steve, I don't know if you're on, if you want to call the roll, otherwise I can.
Tom says he had a very good call.
Go ahead, Madam Chair.
Well, we certainly want to hear more specifics.
This time. Clipful,
Aye.
Warning,
Aye.
Hilsendiger,
Aye.
Peters,
Aye.
Martinezson,
Aye.
Grevelo,
Yes.
Heim,
Yes.
and I'm also a yes. So the motion carries that we will, but, oh, jeez, yeah. Jesus, yeah, you're going read.
I'm
Way too
outvoted
quick.
anyway, so I would say nay or not.
My fault. Okay, we have a motion and carried that this will go before the commission. I think that's a natural point then to go forward on the agenda item to the discussion regarding the presentation to the county commission.
Oh, wait, I have a question.
Yes.
What did we decide for the zoning and this plot? We need to decide that.
Well, it's kind of going to be predicated on this.
Is it?
Well, so the zoning is separate. The-
Yeah,
The
right.
zoning
That's-
change is
yeah.
separate from the plat.
Right.
But the
And we-
zoning change has not been officially approved yet, has it?
It will
Next
be,
month is, or next week is planning and zoning for their approval, and then it goes to city commission.
Yeah.
Okay, and we don't want to stop that process.
No.
Okay, it's
No, we
just this preliminary plot. Okay, thank you for that clarification.
and actually, I'm gonna lead back into Auditor Splonskowski. He brought up a great point the other day. You know, we've got hay leases and ag leases that are due, or we should be advertising for. And so I think presentation to Burleigh County Commission, not only this subject, but the leases of the hayland and the ag land, as well as the plat conversation should all go in front, or at least giving the Burleigh County Commission an update as to what we've been doing for the last few months.
That's definitely my discussion point, consideration point is I feel confident and comfortable encouraging us to continue to go forward. We had an April 7th date, target date to appear before the county commission. My full stop there is, I learned at a young age to not ask for things when people were fighting. And my concern with going before the county commission to ask for approvals on things when it's, I believe it is the last public hearing that day. My mother's telling me, don't ask that question, and the mother in my head is, so is there any discussion around potentially providing an update and coming back for requests for the county's approval on things at a later date?
As a commissioner sitting, I'm gonna ask you to please come on the 7th.
Okay.
Because it is also nice to have regular county business to work on. We are putting too much time and effort into the public hearings, not that we don't want to hear from the residents, but we need to still conduct business. And it's important that you come in front of the commission to update. Auditor Splonskowski was nice enough to pull it off of the agenda last meeting because I was gone. And I asked him to put it on the next agenda for that conversation. And so I really believe that all ties in perfectly.
Okay.
In fact, I'd even ask Auditor Splonskowski, since he's here, to come and give us a little update on what the hayland and ag land leases are. I think they're more fresh in your head than they're on mine. So if you guys wouldn't mind.
Is there any questions or discussions with the commissioner?
I understand your sentiment. I think that if we were gonna wait for other things to settle out, that might take years. So.
Yeah. I was just looking at avoiding the public hearing and a length of time on that, so.
But the bid thing that I moved, I guess I didn't set a date. I would want that to be asked.
Yes.
Because
That
we
would
need to
be
get it
definitely
done,
one.
because we need to find, what if no one bids, like, what are we gonna do then,
Right.
So it, like, I guess I didn't do that in my motion, but, I think we need to at least show up, whether it's us, you, someone, whatever. This needs to get done, this right here, and the update that for Bismarck approved the zoning, Bismarck, wherever we are there, you know, so you get a clap in the back because you did something, you guys, and how many years? Guys, come on.
Right.
15, 20 years? I mean, so like, that's something real, that's real progress.
Yep.
Yeah, I got a question on, an ag land. It's kind of late now to put that out on bids, because people got their contracts already, and they're gonna be out in the fields planting next month. So, you got,
That's my bad. I should have had it up.
long before.
And that's something that I would encourage to be able to bring before the commission at this next meeting, because like Commissioner Munson said, but per his request, it was delayed by 2 weeks. So we need to get those contracts addressed sooner than later so that they can go ahead and plant if the commission does choose to want to let them, and then the other one is just for the A land. So those are the two contracts that will be brought forward to the commission's consideration. If they don't want to go out for bids, they don't have to. They went out for bids last year and the same guy got it, so, it's really up to them.
And, another thing, if, they plant it, and then you plan on moving dirt up there, that's gonna goof up that whole hillside. Right. You'll be ripping up this field. I don't think he would like that too well, wherever it is.
Well, and I think that's where Auditor Splonskowski is very accurate. The sooner we get this in front of Burleigh County Commission, the better we can plan that way as well. Farmers or the horse community or however this moves forward, you know. We've talked about it for several months about getting together and not really working on leases, but user agreements. And I think that's another piece that we need to get ready sooner than later, to make sure that we're prepared for user agreements as opposed to leases.
Dakota's research is clear. Cannabis consumption for teenagers and people in their early 20s is not at all harmless.
So on that,
I'm not talking about Canada, just, you know.
we all did receive, I believe, the proposed outline for the commission presentation, in our emails with the meeting material. I think all of it is pretty straightforward and aligns with what we've discussed here. In number 2 specifically, the overview and progress update on rezoning and plating, to be presented by Svensson and Hagan. I think that is an opportunity then to talk about the wetland piece. And then we would just basically add another request under number 4 to provide that approval to go forward on the motion that was voted on today. Is there any other input on what was sent out for that presentation?
Yeah, I have a question about it. Down on 4, the request, it says to recognize the Equestrian and Egg Center as a project of the Missouri Valley Complex Committee and authorize the development of a formal Burleigh County Equestrian and Egg Center Project Committee to develop the project scope and site plan, funding, development, programming, and operating plan. Isn't that already done?
As I've understood it, it's to legitimize it, that it is a piece that is to be considered along with the plating process. So basically, as it's been explained to me, a figurehead of sorts, that there's a legitimacy behind it,
So-
granted by the commission,
so
recognizing. the
I have a
organization.
question. If a group approach a person with a different idea, is that something this committee would be willing to hear about that land?
I believe
different
it's our goal here to hear all of that kind of.
Or is the land
But-
tied to that group? That's my question. I've been told different things.
I believe,
It-
I'm
I-
under the impression it is, and that's what's been said at 2 commission meetings and one of these,
Is it
but
tied to that group, or is that land available for a different group to come in and develop it?
So 2 things. Number 1, it is this group's responsibility to hear and bring that information to the commission. That's why we created this group. Because this is the sounding board, your guys' decisions then go to Burleigh County Commission. Burleigh County Commission, and I apologize if the words aren't 100% according to how the minutes read, but Burleigh County Commission dedicated X amount of acres to the Ag and Equestrian Center, not specifically here or here or here. You know, so there, because we don't have the plat done, we don't have an area to identify specifically for that project. But they've agreed to allow that group to use up to X amount of acres for that project at the Missouri Valley Complex.
So would that be the existing equestrian group, or if a new group who wanted to call themselves an equestrian group, could they come?
Well, and I think that's where number 4 is on your list, so that it's been identified as the Ag and Equestrian Center, but, and I know that that group has met and we've done the cash flow analysis on that project. But I think that's where number 4 is very important, so that that is identified as this group. Can another one come in? Absolutely. That's our job, is to make sure we're doing our best to make sure this facility, all of this facility is developed for the benefit of Burleigh County.
Dustin,
Do you think it would be a good idea to scratch that third bullet point on number 4 until this committee has vetted what has already been going on?
That would be a great point. This group should be interviewing and or approving that group first and presenting that to Burleigh County Commission.
So the Ag and Equestrian Center group has a seat at this table already,
Correct. You are
but
that.
we are formally
Something,
part of it.
right, yeah,
Yeah.
that's why it gets
Yeah.
confusing.
The land
It's
that
given
was
to that group.
dedicated, I believe that was outlined in that northeast corner. That's been talked about in several meetings. Was that?
Again, that's why I said, don't quote me on the wording in the motion or the wording on the
We'd have to go
paper.
back and look at that.
Right, but I know it was dedicated X amount of acres
Mhm.
for the Ag and Equestrian Center.
Yes.
But you are accurate in that fact that the Ag and Equestrian Center has been identified
Yes.
and is at this table.
which
Yeah, so
I
that's,
would put
that's why
forward
it's
that,
confusing, you
I
already
think,
exist.
I think
That's
what, I
why
think
you-
what happened, Marie, is back when that was all, the dedication part of this. Maybe there was some confusion amongst the commission of really what that meant. And I think that this is legitimizing that
Sure.
and moving forward as, yes,
Cause you exist, I mean, like
Yeah.
you're here, so that's why it's a little weird.
correct.
And maybe we don't need to have that part of it because you do exist and you are here.
I have struggled with that request, however, I also.
You need to get a shirt embroidered, then we know for sure.
Yeah.
But I've struggled with that same thing, that if you already have a seat at the table, which you do, what more can the county commission do? And I think it is to solidify that this is a facility that will eventually have a user agreement, not something programmatically, that is out there. No different than right now, let's just use, this might be a horrible example, but also a seat assigned to the committee is the North Dakota High School Rodeo Association, is that correct?
Yep.
That's not represented at this table right now because they do not have use.
Representation.
They don't have, yeah, representation on, I could say, make the argument that that's also a programmatic area because there isn't a facility for them to own, I guess, for lack of a better term. And I believe, as it was explained at recent meetings, that the Ag and Equestrian Center is looking to, given the path, to have input on the plat for a location for their facility that they plan. I would caution not to remove number 3 on that. I am definitely in agreement that this committee was put together to hear any and all ideas. However, I think it would be in our least best interest to stall anything that's already been on, potentially stall anything that's already had a seat at the table. I think that there's opportunity as we develop the final plat then to take a look at, as you say, the amount of land and where that location goes. But I think it would be premature to stall the movement forward of a seated activity.
It's very similar to having Josh coming to visit about a possible asphalt track, you know, I mean,
Right,
this is the committee that hears that first. So that you guys can make the plan within the facility
right.
and move that to Burleigh County.
And it would be no different than if Josh came forward, he would have come forward today and said, hey, we're gonna go forward to this. That may have been bullet point number 4 to add to the ask.
Right,
I believe part of one of the plans that has been passed out, possibly in the past, had the location of the equestrian center
Mhm.
track, everything up there already.
yes,
So it is part of that plan.
So I would recommend that, make sure that you, make it clear that it's a plan and not the project. And then remove the word funding from that list, because that might become a hangup on the front end.
Right,
So you're asking for approval to, for the plan, not for the funding of the plan just yet until there is a plan to fund.
yeah, and I think that there's words missing in there that can be clarified in a spoken narrative, as I understand, and Ellen, please correct me if I'm wrong, but as it was communicated at a recent Bismarck-Mandan Chamber meeting, that they're looking for the recognition so that they can go forward and secure funding, not asking for funding from the county commission.
That needs to be very, very clear.
Am I
That is
off base
correct.
on that? So,
So what? Cause it's an ask of us to ask, so it's a committee asking for another project committee. And this would be a separate, like, committee that's gonna answer to the commission, not to us, or to us, then us to the commission. So
That's the
what's
way
the
I
flow
see-
chart?
I see it as a subcommittee of this group that gets approval from this group.
Right.
Prior to it going to Burleigh County Commission.
Josh,
That's the
maybe
function.
So it's gonna be the flow
use you as
chart.
an
Yeah,
example.
that's the function
Okay.
of this commission is
That's
to
a chain
hear
of command.
those,
Okay,
Yep.
Right,
hear those first.
ooh, wow.
no different, yeah, you know, than if Josh would have come forward and said, yeah, we would still like to have our facility at the Missouri Valley Complex. We are going to have a committee that's going to be put together to move this project forward and bring a proposal essentially to this committee. So, sorry, I keep picking on.
We still gotta do it for the dirt track, so.
Yeah.
Right, right,
Oh, wow.
yeah. But that again, that's the function of this body is to hear those questions, concerns, approve or deny, and if you approve, then bring them to Burleigh County Commission.
What I think is a little bit different, because we haven't had much done at all the last 20-some years, is all of your committees already existed and had a place out at the facility. This is something that's brand new, therefore is being handled differently, and I believe can set the stage for the future development of the entire complex, that to identify that any interested uses, user agreements must go through a similar chain of command process.
We know once we have the next step taken care of here, there's a group that wants to hold fairs.
Right.
That fair group is gonna come to you, you're going to approve or deny and bring, if you approve, bring it to the
Right,
commission.
the commission.
So all of those steps moving forward, absolutely, this is the body that hears them first.
That was a lot about the bullet point. Are there any discussions on any other bullet points?
I'll go back to the high school rodeo portion of that. Their State High School Rodeo Association is more of a programming piece. And they don't host rodeos except for part of the state finals, which gets bid every 3 years, I believe. So they're more of a programming part than having a state.
Infrastructure.
Yes, exactly.
I had a question for Alan. Have you heard from the BSC rodeo group?
We've been in contact a little bit with them,
Okay.
haven't really had a major sit down with them.
They reached out right before I left on vacation, and so I told them I would get back in touch with them this week.
Reached out to you?
Yeah.
Okay.
happened to make some banners for him, and so one thing led to another, and then he goes, "You're on the Burleigh County Commission." Oh boy, here we go.
You know, we've had discussions with them, with, the facility in itself. You know, being a place to host an event. It's not gonna be the hotel for practice and.
Right.
Bowling, that kind of, that sort of thing. We've had that discussion with them,
Okay.
only because zoning probably wouldn't allow that,
Sure.
the city zoning. But, yeah, we've had some of that discussion.
Good. Good.
So I believe that, the next steps on preparing for the April 7th meeting is to put together, take this feedback and put together a more comprehensive report.
Presentation. Yeah.
Yeah, and presentation, and I would guess that that easily be distributed to the group and encourage everybody in the entire committee to attend that meeting, and if there's pieces that individual groups do want to present to the commission, I would, pass that up the chain of command and we can make it happen.
So we'll ask Auditor Sponskowski now to put you on the agenda when we talk Missouri Valley Complex. There'll be multiple points, and you guys will be one of them.
I am not one to question our commissioner's guidance on this, so I think we'll go first.
Probably first on the agenda.
Unfortunately, I'm thinking it should be after the public hearing.
Public hearing is first.
Rules, schools.
Yeah.
Any other discussion on this agenda item? Seeing as none, our next meeting is scheduled for Wednesday, April 16th, same time, same place. Any other information, discussion, or questions for the good of the order? Hearing none, we will stand in adjournment unless I hear any objections. Meeting adjourned.